Welcome to Millington, Michigan as we look at Arthur Latham Park. 18-hole par 54. It actually does have 9 holes in the back, but it's pretty rough, so we're just going to look at the main 18 holes here. Special shout out to the Woods Disc Golf as well as Provision Financial is sponsoring this so we can do a flyover and take a look at it. Course is pretty close to Goldenrod as well as Hunt's Hideaway. So if you haven't played this one, it's very technical, very wooded. Hole 1, it's a great starting hole. One thing you have to do is get it into this initial gap, which is about 145 feet. I'm a little more than halfway to the hole. Once you get through the gap, what you're going to notice is it's a pretty heavily guarded pin. So staying in the fairway right here is really ideal, but even as you come up to the pin, you can obviously a lot of guardian trees to where the basket is. Hole 2, 207 feet. One thing that is very evident is you pretty much have to play a forehand if you're a right-handed player. Once you get past the short tees here, it is a pretty big right-hand turn to the pin, and so there's really not a great line. It's kind of one of those shots that you have to get lucky, which will be a lot on this course, as you'll see. But again, once we reach the pin here, it's one of those things where it's very heavily guarded. Hole 3 is actually a new hole. This one was changed in 2023. It's a good thing because for those that have played this, going from holes 2 to 3 in the previous layout was a trek and pretty adventurous. So this is just your pretty standard right-hand hyzer to the hole, 231 feet. This is definitely the most open of all the holes on this course. Where the pin is actually used to be hole 18 on the old layout for the front course. So pretty standard, but if you do go long or to the left too far, you're in trouble. It's very thick in there, and you're pretty much playing for par if you do that. Hole 4, 270 feet. It's about 140 feet to this, to where the short pins are, and that's kind of the initial gap right here. You can see the hole 4 sign posted. But from there, it's downhill. Again, very tight line. You have to probably use a mid-range or even a fairway driver. Hole 5, 189 feet. There is a left gap, as you can see there from that main tree, but most people probably play the right-hand hyzer. Once you get past this big tree here, we do go uphill, and you'll start to see the pin is on a mound, but rollaways aren't too bad. There's a couple down trees behind it, and so really it's just about getting as close you can. Rollaways aren't too bad because of all the trees and everything behind it. Hole 6 is a good hole, 210 feet. You know, depending on how you play it, I think most people probably play left of this tree. But again, a low ceiling, probably a forced turnover. Get it into this gap, you know, drifting right a little bit, and then straighten out as we head to the pin. It's probably the most ideal line. Hole 7 is probably the most scenic and famous hole, if you want to call it that. 303 feet. Between these trees right here, it's about 9 feet. So it's a gap that's very tight, and it continues for, you know, pretty close to 300 feet. So if you have a laser beam, that's really what you want to do. As we go through the hole, it does start to widen a little bit, but as you can see, there's rows of these trees that makes it very difficult. Never seen anyone get it all the way through. Very difficult hole. Hole number 8 is another new one they did last year, 2023. Pretty short one at 195 feet. Probably a forehand for right-handed players to get left of this skinny tree right here in the middle. But then it's just one of those things you have to get lucky, as there's a lot of guardian trees all around the pin. Hole number 8 is another one of the new ones. playing to one of the old pins, but you kind of got to get out into the open here is probably the most important thing. If you can continue on to the pin, that's great. Again, the common theme is a lot of guardian trees. That's what we got right here. Hole 10, 138 feet is obviously pretty short, but one thing they added that I like is, as you'll see here, you have a 20-foot in diameter circle. If you miss it, you see that bar right there on the ground, that concrete, that's where you have to do your rethrow, but it's pretty tight. Hole 11, par 3, 396. This is one of the more difficult ones. If you're in the left, you're bogey at best, most likely, because once you make it to the gap up here, it's about 230 feet to this turn, where this bush on the left starts to creep out. Right about here is about 230 feet. That's kind of where you want to be for a good placement shot as you head into this left-handed, very wooded pin location. But again, if you hit to the left, you're pretty much instant bogey. Definitely one of the more difficult holes. Hole 12, we're getting back to the tight ones. There is a left-handed gap here. Again, you have to get lucky. But I think for right-handed players, you're trying to hit this right gap, kind of have to flip something up, and then you probably got about 150 feet you got to go straight as we head into the basket. 240 feet, so it's one of those things where you just hope and pray. But it's pretty tight all the way up to where the pin is. Another mound, but again, we have logs down, so rollaways aren't too bad. But it's definitely a difficult hole. Hole 13 is similar, 240 feet, but the difference is obviously the gap is right here down the middle. It does open up on the right a little bit, so if you can kind of flip something up straight, get past these initial trees, and we have some openings on the right to where it can kind of turn right and then head in towards the basket again, 240 feet. If you go long, there are bushes and a lot of things that will make it difficult to get the birdie or even the par if you do go long. Another tight green for sure. Hole 14, 330 feet, downhill. Kind of got to throw down because a lot of trees with foliage. It's kind of one of those, throw it straight. If you can get some turn on it right, that's probably the best thing. But as you can see, these pine trees up here makes it difficult if you throw it high. It'll just beat it down and you hope for par. There is the road on the left as well as behind it, which would play OB. So you definitely want to not throw far. But this is another cool hole, difficult hole. But not as difficult as in my opinion, hole 15. Hole 15 here is probably one of the most difficult because of this little tree right here in the middle and then that tree on the right. I mean, that's probably a 8-foot gap that you have to hit right here. It does open up a little bit past it, but typically, I would say if you want to err right, it's a little more open for you to get up for your par. But a very, very difficult hole. Hole 16 is a new one, new concrete pad here. They actually also moved the pin location. It used to be in front of this tree, kind of by this telephone pole. But the road will play OB. The baseball diamond on the left will play OB, and then obviously this big tree, it's behind. So I think it's a great pin location. It's difficult, probably a forehand. Have it hyzer in and hopefully not get hit and go into the OB baseball diamond, but a good hole. Hole 17 is the longest at 465 feet. Couple options here. You can play short to before the road, which would play OB, or you can go past it, but if you get there in the right, you're really in a lot of trouble because one thing as we come up to the green here, it's kind of on a peninsula. And so you don't want to be long, obviously left or right. It's really surrounded by OB, and so it's a good pin location. Difficult hole, especially people like me that has a noodle arm. So it's a good hole. 18, final hole here. Obviously, you have OB on the road going up the middle. But really, the most important thing is don't go too far right. If you go too far right, you're in jail and you're playing for par at best. Um, yeah, difficult holes, plays downhill. Initial gap is very tight with that tree. Is the tee pad you're playing underneath a tree. So